pull up the wave.
What's good, y'all? Track Kennedy with StudioSounds.com back with a brand new tutorial. In this video, I'll be breaking down a beat I did a while ago influenced by Travis Scott. For this beat, I wanted to create something that was loosely influenced by the melodic feel of stargazing, but then also adding some of the more aggressive sound heard on the album to the track as well. The full beat was created using only three things: our Stardust Serum Bank, the Submarine drum kit, and a clap from the Legends Never Die drum kit. If you're interested in any of those, they are available at StudioSounds.com right now. Without further talking, let's go ahead and jump to the making of this track. So for this particular beat, I want to go ahead and start breaking down the hook, then move through the verses and show you guys the little intro piece at the end. So basically how this whole beat came about was on pattern 3, I had found this little preset called Dusty Sprites and Stardust, and I just thought this preset sounded really cool and had a unique vibe to it. As I was kind of playing around with it, I came up with this little melody in here, so here's what it sounds like real quick. So I thought that was just a cool, chill, kind of laid back melody that was still melodic, but really wasn't doing too much and was almost kind of in that stargazing lane in my head. So I thought that was a cool little foundation to start with. Once I had that, I wanted to go ahead and just export it out as a quick render, as an audio clip basically, to kind of use it as a sample. And the reason for that was when I was listening to Stargazing, there's a lot of little clicks and pops in there that made it sound like they exported the synths out maybe, or even the whole main melody maybe out as like a sample pretty much, and played it that way just because it's slightly imperfect, that part. So I wanted to try to emulate that. So I exported the melody as an audio clip, and then I imported the audio clip into SliceX, chopped into basically 4 equal parts, and then I added some effects to it. So in SliceX with the effects, this is what it sounds like. And if you listen closely, there's a slight little sub bass in there. That sub bass, I actually ended up removing it from the track, but initially it was just playing these little root notes in here, nothing really too crazy. If you want to add it to the track, you can, but if you listen to it, I basically filtered out most of it, so it's not really needed. But anyway, so I had a little filter in here that just kind of chopped out the bottom end, got rid of that sub, and then I just raised it slightly to give it a little bit more presence. And then the other thing I did was I threw a gross speed on here with a half speed setting, and I turned it down to 70. And what that does is it just helps to make sure it's not quite as bright. And then it also sometimes adds little notes in there just because of the different timing that almost serve as like a little counter melody. So with those two, I just played it for you guys, but here's what it sounds like dry, and then I'll apply the effects just to show you guys. And I'll only apply the gross speed just because there's no point listening to the sub. So it just makes it a little bit darker and just gave it a cool little vibe in my opinion. So that's pattern 5. That was kind of where everything was built off of. From there, I wanted just to add kind of a little bit more of a cinematic touch to it. And one great way and just easy way to do that is to use atmospheric pads. So Stardust, it just comes with a couple atmospheric pads that just have a cool vibe to them that you can use really quickly to add, like I said, a cinematic touch or just a more dramatic kind of complex vibe to a melody. So all I did was just hold the root note and basically ended up with this. But when you layer that with the melody, this is what you ended up with. So I thought that sounded pretty cool. The next thing I did was add this little square, well, it's not even a pluck, it's just a little lead, but just kind of accent the melodies a little bit. Just add a couple little simple notes in here. So that just helps make a little bit more melodic and adds a nice little texture to it. From there, I have pattern 4 layered into here. Now pattern 4 is basically just pattern 3, the little main melody pattern that I was showing you guys earlier, and all I did basically was just remove the top end melody just to be left with this part. Just a nice little calmer version of my main melody. Let me just put these back in here just for now. But basically I did the same thing, removed those, exported it out as a audio clip, and ended up with this section, which if we just remove this quickly, is what it sounds like. It just has a ton of effects on it, so let me just turn these off quickly. So this is what you end up with, and then I just pitched it all the way up as I just showed you guys, and then I added a couple of different effects to it. I wanted this to be more of an ambience type sound and not something that's super in your face. So the first thing I did was just kind of help wash it out. I just turned up the wetness on this reverb, turned down the dryness levels to around 75, the decay times around 2.6 seconds, and turned the size all the way up. Then the next thing that's on here is a half speed gross speed again, and this one's turned all the way up. And then I just have an EQ to cut the bottom end I don't need, and then just boosted a couple of frequencies just to make sure it adds the ambience I needed. And then this just kind of layers with everything else for the hook. So here's what it sounds like. It's very kind of faint. Like I said, it's an ambience type sound, but if you have headphones or monitors, you can probably kind of pick it up. So all that comes together just to give you a nice kind of solid layer to build on top of. From there, I added this little strumming sound in there. And the cool thing about Stardust is that even though it has a lot of the synths and stuff that you would expect, it also has a lot of kind of organic stuff that you really don't expect in synths, not in Serum or just kind of most synths at all. And one of those sounds that we have in here is this little guitar kind of hit strum type sound. And here's what it sounds like by itself. And then as you guys can see, I just chopped that up, just kind of fit the pattern that I wanted to play. So here's what it sounds like with the track. And then just to kind of finish up the hook for the most part, I just added in this little bass line. This is just another little 808 sub from Stardust. Just playing the root note pretty much. Nothing really too crazy, but when you combine it with everything else is what you end up with. And then from there, it's going to go ahead and transition to the verse piece again. So instead of using just kind of like a typical transition effect, I found this little atmospheric pad in here again that just had kind of like a really crazy sound to it. And here, let me just play it solo for you guys, just so you guys can hear it. And I believe that's called the Howling Ghosts from Stardust again. So I wanted to use that as a transition piece just because it felt like a horror kind of crazy type piece, and then it was just a little bit more different than your standard kind of transition piece. So when you combine that with everything else is what you end up with. And then from here, it's going to go ahead and transition into the verse. So let's jump into the next section. I'll break down these patterns for you guys. So when the track actually moves to the verse, the very first thing that kind of switches up is that pattern 4 takes over for pattern 5. Now pattern 4 is basically just that same little melody that I was showing you guys earlier, this right here. It's the same little sample exported as an audio clip, but the only difference to the melody on this one is that I removed basically all of these except this little top end note. I'm not sure if I showed you guys earlier, but in the other one the top end note should be removed. In this one it was not. So on pattern 4, this is what it sounds like. Here it is by itself. And then it just has a couple of different effects on here. It just has a EQ. Again, just accent the little parts I wanted, cut a little bit of the top end, get rid of the low end I don't need. Again, a half speed just turned down just to give it that same little vibe that we had earlier with the other samples, so they somewhat match. So it basically just goes from this section over to pattern 4. And then the other thing that is a little bit different in here is that we don't use marker 3 or 4. So we just use the first 2. And if you listen to it, it's a little bit more imperfect than the hook is, which just kind of helps that little sample feel that I was talking about earlier from Stargazing. So I thought that fit. From there, just kind of pretty standard stuff. A hi-hat. And this is just from the Legends Never Die drum kit. And then if you look at it, it does have a quantize with a little bit of velocity change in here. So I'm not sure, I can't remember just off the top of my head what setting I ended up using in here. But if you just kind of go through here and just find one that you like and just make sure that the velocity is set to something that you're kind of comfortable with, it will give you a little bit of a much better or a unique bounce, I would say, compared to just kind of your standard trap stuff. So that's what you're seeing there. The next thing that's in here is just a simple little clap. This is from Legends Never Die as well. Just shortened it up a little bit, added a reverb to it. Then here's a quick little snare. This is from the Submarine drum kit. Again, just shortened it up and pitched it just to make sure it kind of fit the mood of the track. But when you add those 3, this is what you end up with. So there's still a couple of other things in here. Here's a second little hi-hat that I added in here. This is from the Submarine drum kit, and I just pitched it down. And it just helps kind of set the bounce in here, but here's what it sounds like with the track. Then you have 14, which is just the 808 again. 808 sub 1 from Stardust again. Just playing the root note, slight little slide up here. Really nothing too difficult. Threw the quantize on here as well. Just made sure that the velocity setting was turned down. For most of the drums, I use the MPC 2. As far as my kicks go, that's usually my go-to setting. So that's probably what I ended up using here as well, if you want to emulate it. But when you combine the 808 in here as well, it just helps kind of round out the sound. And here's what it sounds like. And then just to kind of complete the drums, we have this little open hat from Submarine again. And I just pitched that down, or I basically just played a lower note with it. And I just have it truncated, so it'll just go ahead and cut off as soon as I want it to, basically. So to kind of do that, all you want to do is you want to go ahead and turn all these to the left. You can go to the left, or I guess the release time to the left as well. And then just turn the hold all the way up. This is the most important part, that these are to the left and this one is to the right. And that'll just allow you to have the note cut off as soon as it's not playing anymore versus it playing the sample all the way through. but here's what this sounds like when you combine it with the track. So pretty simple. And then the last little completing part to the drums is just this little kind of top end kick, just to add a little bit of punch to it. And this is from the Submarine drum kit, and when you layer it with the 808, this is what it sounds like. And then there you have the little transition piece again with just a quick little drop, so you can just go ahead and select whatever patterns you want to cut back, and then you can just kind of move them around to your taste and your needs for the track. So just a simple little drop, and then from here it goes into a much more kind of aggressive type sound. So let's jump in the next section. I'll show you guys those patterns. So this next little section, there's a couple of parts that are still shared from over here. So I'm going to go ahead and just play the couple of parts that are kind of standard and move through the track, just so you guys can kind of get an idea of what stays the same, excuse me, and what's going to change up. So here's what it sounds like right now. So as you guys can see, some of the drums, the hats, different things kind of stay consistent throughout there. So the very first big kind of change that I wanted is I just wanted something dramatic, something that wasn't that kind of cool, laid back, melodic feel that the rest of the track had. So what I did was I took that same pattern, which was basically this right here, with that whole sub and everything in it, and I just went ahead and I cloned it. I pitched it, or excuse me, I time stretched it to 2 bars, pitched it all the way up, normalized it, and reversed it. And then what I did was I went ahead and I took this entire pattern and I dragged it into the playlist. Now some of you guys are probably already familiar with this, but some of you guys might not be. But basically there's a quick little setting that you can go into in FL Studio and just use a little chop section if you have like a sample that you want to chop up and maybe you don't want to do it yourself, or you want to get some ideas on how it might sound with different chops, and you can do that in here quickly. So for my particular application, I ended up using just the beat shuffle to end up with the pattern that I have, and then I basically just use that pattern throughout the track. So basically here's that section right here, and here's what it sounds like with the track. So I thought that sounded really cool, and one thing that I just kind of quickly want to point out that I noticed while actually making this tutorial is that if you actually just don't reverse this and just move it back to basically standard and let it play like this, I thought this just had a really cool sound. So I'm thinking of actually maybe making a little challenge for you guys and give you guys like a MIDI keyboard and a VST, or excuse me, not a VST, but some VST presets and different kits for you guys as like a prize for somebody who might flip this the best. But this is just kind of the concept that I heard in here that I thought was kind of hard, that I did not end up using, that some of you guys might want to flip. But here's what it sounds like. I thought that sounded pretty cool and could actually just be like a whole beat by itself. But anyway, for my version, I ended up reversing it, and I'll probably get you guys some details here over the next week. If there's interest, if any of you guys want to flip that as like a contest type beat, let me know. But anyway, so that was kind of the main thing that I did. Then from there were just kind of slight little layers. I added in some little rolled hi-hats in here, just kind of help pick up the pace. Really simple. Then there's the 808. So the 808 just plays a more busy pattern compared to 14. So as you guys can see, Just a couple little different slide ups and stuff to make it a little bit more dramatic. But when you add it to the track, that's what you end up with. So I thought that sounded pretty cool, but one thing that I kind of noticed on the album was that they used a lot of kind of harsh synth basses on the bottom end just to create kind of patterns that you don't hear a lot. And it kind of reminded me of like the old school, or I guess a twist on the old school Cool Kid sound, which I was kind of a big fan of. So I wanted just to add kind of like a secondary synth to the bottom end to make it a little bit more unique and match the theme of the album. So all I did was I took the pattern from pattern 14, the 808 pattern, which is a little bit more simple, and I copied it down to pattern 21, and I used a preset called the Edgy Wow Bass from Astro World to kind of come up with this. And then as you guys can see, threw a little fast distort in there just to make it stand out in the track and just make it sure it's not like a pretty type sound. It has just that grit to it. And then I threw a parametric EQ, just cut out that bottom end so it's not really clashing with the 808 as much and just has more of a presence in there. And I thought that sounded really good. And then from there, just kind of super simple stuff. We have this little pattern in here, which is this little slow strum. Like I said earlier, Stardust just has a couple of different presets in there that you just really wouldn't expect, and this was one of the ones that I really ended up liking. And without any effects on it, this sounds like this basically. And I thought that sounded cool, but I just wanted it to not be as pretty, and I wanted just to kind of make it a little bit more lo-fi. So the first thing I did was I added a vocal decks to it with the reverb 2 setting, which just kind of helps to make the sound not as pretty. I really like this reverb setting, and I think a lot of people don't really know about it compared to. So that was the first thing I did to it. Then I threw a gross beat on it just to kind of chop it up and make sure that it was kind of fitting with the beat of the track. I didn't want it really kind of messing up the flow and the groove of it. So I wanted it to be a little bit more chopped up so it just fits the groove of the drums. So that's all I did right there. Threw a 1 beat gate on it. Then I threw a EQ on it, just got rid of a lot of bottom end and the low mids just so it's not clashing, and then just accented the top end to make sure it stands out in the mix a little bit. Threw a fast distort on there just to make sure it's not as pretty again. And then just the delay. The delay is basically, it just serves as like a little piece in here that makes sure that when this gate gets to these down sections where there's nothing playing, that's not just a super dry blob of sound there. I feel like the delay just kind of helps it flow a little bit better. So whenever I'm usually using gates like this, unless I want it to be super dramatic and apparent, I'll usually throw a little delay just to kind of fill in little gaps, I would say. So when you combine everything, this is what you end up with. And then it goes from just that super energetic kind of vibe that you get from this verse into just that kind of chill, laid back, melodic vibe of the hook. And I just thought that was kind of a cool A and B kind of contrast, and just sounded really good in there. And then from there, it was basically just about creating a quick little intro. So as you guys can tell, just use the first little atmospheric pad section I showed you guys earlier. Over here for the transition, I layered the second little scream. Pattern 5, just playing the main melody again.
Track, pull up the wave.
And then from there, it drops into a slightly more dramatic section with that little 808 playing again, the bottom end from the hook section. Then you get pattern 16, again that little square lead that I showed you guys. And then we just transition it out with that little scream into the verse. So here's what it sounds like going from the intro to the verse. and then just kind of continues from there as I showed you guys. So that pretty much covers it for this tutorial. I hope you guys learned something new. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for all the support. If there's anything from this video that you want to pick up, any of the sounds, the drums, you can do so right now at studiosounds.com. And don't forget to check the description of this video for a quick little coupon just so you can save yourself some money if you want to pick up any of these kits. Thank you guys for all the support. My name is Track Kennedy, and until next time, studiosounds.com.